Lord, I pray that you just give us humility as we approach this topic, Lord, that on the surface seems simple, but as you dig in, becomes much more complex. So, Lord, I pray that you help us to think wisely, to grow as people, Lord. And I just pray that this might arouse more conversation about what it means to be a truthful person, an honest person, as well as a loving and caring church. And we ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. So we're still going through the book of Proverbs, and I mentioned a little bit last week about how I'm proceeding from this point forward. I have taken and gone through in depth, especially chapters 10 through 31, and read the Proverbs and categorized them into subjects, because oftentimes the what one what one verse says is not really the same subject as what the next verse says in the book of Proverbs. It's a collection of proverbs, it's a collection of sayings. And so, in order to kind of effectively preach through a book like this, I've tried to, as much as possible, read all of them and choose the topics that are talked about the most, and then kind of bombard you with all the verses. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. And there's one of the topics that is talked about quite a bit is the topic of honesty, truthfulness, being a person of your word. And in one sense, you think, okay, this is simple. Don't tell lies. But then when you start digging into all that it says, and especially the complexities that come with being an international church, what constitutes a lie, what it can become a very complicated question. There's also quite a few verses about doing the right thing with the truth. Just because you have knowledge doesn't mean it's right to tell knowledge sometimes. And so there's a lot related to this subject in the book of Proverbs. Now, as I dig more into it and thought more about it, I realized how big culture and the cultural background that you come from, how much that really plays a part into the way you think about this subject. And so that's not to say that it's culturally relative. It's just saying that is, as you observe and understand different cultures' points of view, you realize the complexities of things. And me, I'm an American, and so I come from an American mindset when it comes to truth. And Americans can be particularly harsh when it comes to lies. We're very unforgiving of lies, Americans. You can still see videos of Bill Clinton. I did not have relations with that woman, and he's never going to get through that. It was a lie, and in America, that's unforgivable, especially of a president. And so part of this comes back to, I think, the way the culture is raised. An example is this old story of George Washington, and there's a painting I want to show you. George Washington is one of the, I don't know, he's considered a great man, and he probably was a great man. He did a lot of great things. He was the first general. He seemed to be a believer, a man of character. And there's this old myth about him. I don't know if it's true or not, so I'm going to call it a myth, of when he chopped down a cherry tree. So some of y'all may have heard this before, but when he was a child, he received this present of a hatchet. And it's funny, you can see his old man face on his child body. But he that's from the dollar bill. Right? So he chopped down the cherry tree. And when his dad approached him and asked him about it, his response was, "I cannot tell a lie." And he confessed to chopping down the cherry tree. Now, I don't know if this was true or not, but this story was picked up by a Presbyterian minister in that era, and the purpose was to teach children the importance of honesty. And so it kind of became part of children's books. And so part of the reasons Americans have this kind of background of truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God, it comes from this intentionality of this minister to instill honesty in people. You want what you say to reflect the way things are. Okay, that's the idea of truth. And I think there's good biblical support for this as well. It was a Christian who did this. Matthew just read, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. Therefore, we must tell the truth. We must present an accurate statement of the way things are in reality. But that being said, even in the Bible, it can be a little bit more complicated than that. One of the stories that always gets brought up on this subject is the story of Rahab. How many of you know this story? Okay. I'm going to read that. This is from Joshua chapter 2, and it concerns the idea of Israelite spies going into the land. By the way, if there's ever such thing as a spy, their job is to be deceptive. Okay? And this spy was from Israel going in to scout out Jericho. And it was told to the king of Jericho, "Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." The king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. And she said, "True, the men came to me, but I do not know where they were from, and the gate was about to be closed at dark, and the men went out." A lie. Not true. "I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overcome them." She had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of the flax in order on the roof. So we have an example here of she was a prostitute in the land, and she hid deceptively the spies who were being deceptive, and she lied about it, okay? And it seems to be in this that she's doing a positive thing. And we know that the evaluation of her actions was positive because in Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament, where there's the famous verses of the Faith Hall of Fame, the people who've done the most, Rahab, this makes the list. And this is kind of the whole story. But she makes the list. It says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, "By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient," which is Jericho, what ends up happening, "because she gave a friendly welcome to the spies." Now, it is true that it is not specifically commended for the lie, yet that's effectively what she did. So it can become very difficult to evaluate, was what she did right or wrong? It's the same kind of thing when we approach something like the situation with Corrie ten Boom or hiding Jews in World War II, right? They made a decision to build a room to hide the Jews from the Gestapo in order to save their life, right? They made that, so there was an intention to deceive, right? And, you know, the question is, how do you evaluate that kind of ethic? Some people say, well, what they did is wrong. They should never deceive. They should have not hidden the Jews. This is up to the Lord. They shouldn't have interfered. Some would go on the other end and say, well, no, they were promoting justice. And so it was out of a motivation of their heart that they were deceiving in order to save, just like Rahab did. Some people, I find this position inconsistent, but some people try to go in the middle. And they say it was right for them to hide them, but if the Gestapo came and asked them the direct question, "Are you hiding them?" you must say, "Yes, I'm hiding them." Right? And I've heard people like make that argument, and I don't see it. There's an inconsistency between the heart and the letter there. You see, you're missing the point. If you were okay with the deceiving, then why does it matter if you're just saying it? You see, so there's different positions on this point, and as you see, it can become very complicated when it comes to this idea of is it right to be deceptive or not in that situation. We can see similar things. We're smuggling Bibles into a foreign country, or these kind of, is it okay to deceive for the sake of good, for the sake of justice when there's a sinful situation going on? Also, beyond those kind of odd ethical questions, because those are exceptions rather than the rule, right? Most of the time, it's just let your yes be yes and your no, no. It's very simple with Jesus, seemingly. But then when we talk about cultural expressions and expectations of truth, there can be many different difficult situations. Some cultures or people even, we will tell untruths for the sake of saving face. Okay, the classic example, the lady comes up and says, "Do you think I'm fat?" Okay, you're in a really bad situation if you actually do think she's fat, because you can choose to say the truth and offend and bring about an unhealthy response. You would never express that opinion on your own because you wouldn't want that person to deal with the consequences of you saying that, right? But when you're put on the spot, hey, women, just don't ask that question, right? You know, but there's these kind of similar questions. Do you like my dress, or do you like the poem I wrote? Sometimes there's fishing for compliment kind of things that makes people want to avoid the truth for the sake of helping the person, right? So is it right or wrong to kind of fudge it a little bit in that situation? Telling untruths for misdirecting blame. This is kind of a cultural thing. I heard a story of a merchant. Someone went in and bought a lamp, and they were out of the lamp, and so they had to order it. And so this was a foreigner, you know, and doing business with a local. And I'm not going to tell you all the names of the countries when I do this, but and so he had bought the lamp, and the reality, the true situation was that they were out of stock. And so they had to order it, and they didn't know when it was coming in. But the person who had bought it went away expecting that it was going to come in because he told him that it was. And so when he called the next day, it's like, why hasn't it come in? It was like, oh, well, the delivery person got sick, right? And so even though that's not true, he didn't want to communicate that it is my fault and I'm not taking care of you as an owner. In that culture, that was wrong. Whereas in the culture of the person, he would much rather just know what is actually the case. He's not holding it against that person, but he has to make plans. And so he had offered to go and, I'll just come by the store and pick it up, because the truth he was operating under was it was the delivery guy's fault, right? And so as he kept insisting, eventually the truth had to come out. But he hadn't. There was a way of indirect communication in that country that because he was not part of that country, he didn't get. Right? So that brings up another point about cultural. Indirect versus direct communication. Sometimes cultures can be very direct. I'm going to tell you what I think. The positive is there is clarity. The negative, it can offend. Right? And on the other side, the indirect cultures, the positive is you save face. The negative is if you're not from that culture, you don't understand the indirect communication. So you actually, the communication has not happened. Premarital counseling for you guys? But this is just part of like the when we talk about truth, how much does precision matter? Are you okay with saying a general thing? When someone invites you to dinner, you may have experienced this in our church. Some cultures, they won't invite you to dinner unless there's a precise, you're coming at this time, right? Some cultures will say, I want you to come to dinner, and it'd be a general, I don't know when I'm going to be available, but I want that to happen. So in their mind is they're sincerely saying it, but they haven't come up with the exact time. And in some cultures, they may say, I want to do it, but they actually don't want to do it and have no intention of ever doing it. You see? But they've said they wanted to do it because they don't want you to feel dishonored. You see? All of these things relate to what do we do about the truth? Where is the truth? How important is it that we actually say things that correspond to reality? And how precise about reality do we have to be in order for it to qualify as the truth? In an international church, this is one reason why some people say you can't have a bunch of internationals together. Communication's too hard. But we see that when we have the right heart, we can find a way to both be honest with each other and help each other save face. You see, the truth is important. And as we see from these verses, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. We must be speaking in accordance with reality, the way things are, while at the same time recognizing the truth can be a weapon that harms, that we must be careful with it and think about what is good for the other person. Have our hearts being right. Now, I want to show you several verses here. And the verses that were read, I had them read because there were several in a row. And you can see this kind of emphasis here, but there's more general views on truthfulness and lying here. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. There's a contrast here. The idea of truth is an enduring thing, but if you are deceiving, if you're lying, it's going to pass away because it's not real. And oftentimes you're going to have to keep inventing more lies to kind of cover the lie that you had. And so there's an enduring nature to the truth simply because it corresponds with reality. Deceit, it says, is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan for peace have joy. And I want you to see there's kind of an imprecise parallelism in this verse. You know, the idea that the deceitful plotters do not have real joy. You can see kind of the beginning and the end. While at the same time, counselors who are promoting peace, they're not deceitful people. You see, this correspondence between discord and lies is there. Someone who is promoting peace is not someone who is lying. This is true of someone who is, it seems like, intentionally deceiving. The idea of manipulating. If you want to be a peacemaker, you are not a manipulator. You are someone who is promoting peace through truth-telling. No ill befalls the righteous, the wicked are filled with trouble. And then there's this verse that we looked at, the lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. And there's this idea that, especially in the context of all of this, that someone who is destroying people through their lies, and this is detestable to the Lord, that the Lord values truth. It's a simple verse. Jesus said it very plainly as well. I love the way he said it. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. You don't need to swear because people know your character enough that what you say corresponds with reality. What you say, they can trust. You see? And then, however, balance it out here. Look at this next verse. A prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. Now, I'm going to talk about this later on in the sermon, this verse in particular. But I want you to notice that truth does not mean saying everything that you know to everyone all the time. There is such thing as prudence in when you use and reveal truth. Now, I want to move forward here because there's a couple of categories of truthfulness that have quite a few verses in it. You can go to the next 2 slides from now. Yes, this one. There is a lot of verses in the Proverbs where honesty and dishonesty is put into the category of kind of business practices or dishonest gain. And of course, it's a huge subject. There's classes talking about business ethics at business school, and I hope that especially how our Christian faith would contribute to those discussions. I hope that this begins more dialogue outside of this, but let me just present it as the way the Proverbs presents it, just to whet our appetites a bit. There's a lot in there that uses the illustration of scales and weights and dishonest scales. And what this means is, imagine that you're a vendor back in this time, right? And you're buying things and according to weight. And so you go up to the vendor, and it was often the case that the vendor had 2 different scales, one that was too heavy and one that was too light, depending on whether he was buying or selling. You see? And so it was very easy for these vendors to cheat people out of money based on using their own scales. And so that sets the context for what these proverbs are speaking against, right? So, like for example, 11:1, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. But a just weight is his delight. Now, we're going to have a whole sermon later about work and profession in the Proverbs. And so a lot of this will be saved for then. But generally speaking, before, as it relates here, your job and your work is for the purpose of contributing to society. It's not self-fulfillment, right? You're offering something to help the social cause, okay, in the scripture. That's part of God's calling. That's part of God's design for the world, is that we labor in order to help people, okay, not just for whatever our paycheck is. And so what's going on as it relates to this honesty and balance is that you're actually promoting corruption and injustice in your society when you are dishonest in these business practices. So not only are you stealing, which is bad enough, but you're also promoting you're promoting a society of stealing because you're impacting the economy. You see what's going? Because your prices are this, that means the others' prices are going to be this as well. And there's a whole corrupt nature that's coming from dishonest practices. And this, for the Lord, is an abomination. The wicked earns deceptive wages, it says, but one who sows righteousness gets a sure reward. Again, a worker deserves his wages. That's clear in the scripture. But it's also, but the worker does not deserve dishonest wages, right? And so you get what you reap what you sow is the prescribed here. You don't run after get rich schemes that you'll see later. Like this is you don't earn deceptive wages. You don't get wages at the expense of others. Okay, these are the general truths here. How that looks in our practice is for some of you business people to answer better than me. But the point here is that you should be honest and promote the good of the society in the way that you do business. Unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord. You can see there's several verses like this. This chapter 20, verse 17. This one I think is important, especially if we go back to the verses that we looked at about the heart and the importance of the heart in all of this. Bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be full of gravel. What does this mean? Well, the scammer, the person who likes to get wealthy by cheating other people, they think that this is a sweet thing. They get the money and they think it's good. But they are actually the one who is deceived in this situation. Why? Because they have lost something more valuable than money. They've lost their hearts. They have compromised themselves in their heart, which is to be, you remember the verse we looked at and the emphasis we had, is to be kept at all costs. The wellspring of life is what it calls the heart. That is what they have lost in this exchange. So the honesty is a way that you're guarding your heart. Unequal weights are an abomination to the Lord. False scales are not good. And how does this relate to us in the 20th century? Getting treasured by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a snare of death. So, again, some of you business MBAs and people who are in this realm have conversations about what this actually looks like in your life. But in our day-to-day life, we can even say, do we cheat our taxes? Do we fudge the numbers a little bit? When we get on the bus, do we pay for a ticket? All of these things are ways that we can cheat the system if we want. But when we cheat the system, we lose our heart. When we're dishonest about our money. There's another set of verses that is very prominent in the Proverbs that has to do with this word witness. And this this brings about the idea of a courtroom setting. You're bearing witness to an event that you saw. And so oftentimes in this situation, there's justice at stake. And one of the reasons why the Bible is so against the false witness is because the false witness, if there is a false witness, there will, as a result, for sure be injustice. The truth, the accurate statement that reflects reality, has not been told. So, the event that has been told is false, and the judgment that will come about that incident will be false. You see, the witness who is a false witness is promoting injustice in society. There's truth at stake. And so you see this emphasis. There's several verses about this as well. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness utters deceit. A faithful witness, here this one is the character of the person going in. He's described. A faithful witness is somebody does not lie. It's not saying that it's not written the other way around. It's the character first and then the action. And if you are someone who is a faithful witness, you're not going to be someone who lies. A false witness breathes out lies. A truthful witness, and again, this breathes out. This is a phrase that's fairly common in the Bible that has to do with coming from inside and who you are. You're a liar, so you're bringing out lies. That's kind of the emphasis here. And the reason you might be a liar, if we go back to our heart-related issues, is that you've gone from being a simple to a fool to a scoffer because you refuse to hear rebuke, and you've allowed your heart to become more and more dishonest. And then you're one who breathes out lies. A truthful witness saves lives. Again, they're bringing about justice. They're telling things, they're letting those who are involved in judging make accurate judgments. But the one who breathes out lies is deceitful. A false witness, look at verses, I want you to notice the verse numbers, 19:5 and 19:9. These verses are right beside each other, and they're almost saying the exact same thing, word for word, almost. Look at it. A false witness will go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape. That's 5. Verse 9, a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will perish. So, same thing. If you're giving false testimony, if you're the perjurer, don't think you're going to get away with it. You're not going to, according to this. The Lord, lying tongue is an abomination to the Lord. He who breathes out lies will not escape and will perish. This is what it's saying. A false witness, again, in 21 verse 28, will perish. And I like this part here. This is interesting. But the word of a man who hears will endure. Which means, what I think we can, a connection I think we can make, it is not only an intentional lie that is talked about here, that's important, but also an incompetent lie. It's comes from someone who has not listened, right? Who is speaking as if they know the truth and may even think they know the truth, but they're actually giving an inaccurate depiction of reality because they're being irresponsible with the truth, what they believe is the truth. So there is the necessity of one who is listening here if they're going to be a fair witness. And if you're giving witness of something that you're unclear on, the truth is saying that you're unclear about it. And many of us, this might sound, okay, well, have you ever given testimony in a court? Maybe some of you have, but maybe some of you haven't. And if you have, it hasn't been something that you've done a lot. But you have given testimony, especially if you have friends that are in conflict with each other, or you have personal conflict to go through, and you are trying to bear witness to things that happen, right? And there's a lot at stake in relationships in these kind of situations. This is very important. When you are bearing witness that you're reflecting reality. And if you are unsure, the reality that you need to reflect is your unsureness. Okay? And so there is a responsibility to this, because great injustices can happen when witnesses give false information. There's another big category here in the Proverbs that have to do with the how you use the truth. And related to this is questions about things like slander and saying things that have been told to you in confidence. These kinds of questions are also there. In one commentator, when he's trying to give kind of a summary idea of the idea of slander, he says the malicious slanderer, out of disloyalty, divulges a confidence, abets the enemy, sows dissension, and disrupts and destroys the community, including his closest friends. His malice may be prompted by revenge, material gain, or wanton mischief, but he who is faithful designates a person who remains loyally attached to another and can be relied on. And so he's trying to summarize the Proverbs teaching in that way. And this idea, all of the bad heart-related issues that come from someone who delights in slandering someone else, right? And you can justify it by saying, oh, it's the truth, it reflects reality, but you've neglected the other part. It's like, but is this truth good to be revealed right now? It's not always good to reveal all truth. If you want evidence of that, think about the way the Lord reveals himself to us. He doesn't tell us everything that we would ever want to know. We have limited knowledge, and the knowledge about the world that we have is limited to what God wants us to know. We understand he gives us the truth that we need for the time that we need. He doesn't tell us the future. He tells us it's wrong to try to predict or try to get fortune tellers to come and tell us what our future is. It's knowledge that we weren't meant to have. In the same way, sometimes we have knowledge that is not good for everyone to have. One obvious example is the idea of a counselor. A counselor has a confidentiality situation with their patient, and it would be wrong against the law if that counselor went and divulged information. Right? We have a search committee going on to do the pastor search right now, and they have a confidentiality agreement. They're not allowed to just go and talk about what happens in those meetings because there's an ethical thing about divulging information. So obviously there are times when truth is to be concealed and when truth is to be said. The wisdom-related questions concern when do we say things and when do we not say things. Okay? And here there's a lot of talk about times when it is inappropriate to say things. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. Now, this idea goes about, it's like they're going out seeking to gossip. Gossip is related here. There's commands, very specific commands against slandering in the law, in the Torah, and those commands normally accompanied with the positive command, love your neighbor as yourself. Right? You're not slandering because you're supposed to love the person that you're slandering. Right? There's never a place in Christian faith where you're not supposed to be loving your neighbor. Jesus says your neighbor applies even to your enemy. Okay? So slander, gossip, these things that destroy people's character, we don't go about doing that. We see in 12:23, a prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. Now, this word prudent is very interesting. In English, when it says prudent, it doesn't seem as controversial. But this word can also be translated crafty. And did you know that it's the exact same Hebrew word that describes the serpent in Genesis chapter 3? The crafty serpent. You see that serpent, he didn't lie. Eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and you'll be like God. That was the truth. But it was a truth that was used to manipulate. Right? It was a piece of the truth, and it was the piece of the truth they didn't need. It was the piece of the truth that the serpent wanted in order to manipulate them to do what they wanted, but it was deliberately incomplete And it was also something that was not something God had revealed to them. And so this is in the negative way. You could even translate it like shrewd. But in the positive way here, and Jesus even said, be as shrewd as serpents at one point to his disciples. It is the idea that you to be very clever and shrewd in the way you use the knowledge that you have. And it's not for the sake of, like the serpent, destroying people. You're being shrewd with knowledge for the sake of helping people. You're trying to be very careful what you say to people because you're wanting whatever you say to contribute to them loving God more. You want what you say to them to contribute to their flourishing. That's why a situation when someone comes up and asks you if they're fat, you don't want to maybe give the truth in that situation. You want to try to find a way to use, to bring about good for the person who asked that question. What's behind that question? Why are you asking that to me? You see, it becomes a shrewd, clever, wisdom-related thing in how we speak to others and handle the truth. But this idea of gossip and speaking behind each other's back is equally condemned. In 1628, a dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer separates close friends. We all know that happens. We all know it's wrong. We all still do it. Here, if you want to have peace, you're not to be a person who spreads strife. You're supposed to be a person who promotes peace and whispering behind closed doors and giving away knowledge that is not to be given away. Because this isn't even about lying necessarily. It could be lying, but you could be telling truths that are just inappropriate to say to someone else. We see verse 17:9 shows how this relates to forgiveness. Look at this. Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. Now, I've preached on this in the past, and I hope if you haven't heard me talk on it, this will be talked about later because I can't give the full argument. But when you say to someone, I forgive you, you are making a promise to not remember their sin. What's the true reality is they sinned. But what you are agreeing to do when you say that is I'm never going to bring it up anymore. I'm going to act as if it didn't happen. That's my promise to you. So when you keep bringing up old wounds, right, even if it's true, you're going against what forgiveness is. Here it says, whoever covers an offense is one who is seeking love, but repeats a matter separates close friends. And the reason forgiveness must be this way is because the only way genuine, full restoration of relationship happens is when the offense is removed. And the only way to remove is a promise to not remember, which the Bible calls forgiveness. Whoever goes about slandering, it says, reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with a simple babbler. This also relates to who you associate with. You speak truth to trustworthy people. You be wise when you notice people being babblers. Now, there's a lot here, and I hope it brings up more discussions, but I want to give some big picture principles, especially recognizing we come from such different backgrounds, and how this might, hit us all. Just a few things. One, the Bible and God values truthfulness and honesty. The Bible also values love for others and humility. So, be careful that saving face is not a disguised form of pride and arrogance. Right? If we are for the sake of others withholding truth, for their good, we can have an argument that we're loving our neighbor as ourselves, right? But if our disguising the truth is just to make ourselves look better, then there's actually no biblical warrant for that, right? That is both untruthful and unkind. So be careful that you're not using it that way. Be careful that telling the truth is not a way to slander or look down or hurt people. Don't use the truth as a weapon. Use the truth as a medicine. You see? Be wise in the way you speak truth. Think through what is good. And this is a personal relationship thing. You got to know the person. You got to listen to the person to be able to evaluate how to speak truth to them. But truth is always important, right? Truth is the overarching thing here. But the command to love others as yourself needs to be applied. Remember, the heart is the key. Where is your heart in these things? Okay?